Hey, when the Provost is speaking.
Hey, I know, right? Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Well, my name is Don Leo, and I have the honor of serving as the Executive Vice President and Provost here at Ohio University, and I also have the honor of starting off our December university updates. President Gonzalez is here, and she's going to close our session today, but I have the honor of beginning, and I want to welcome everybody, not only those here that are in the Baker Theater, but I know that many of you are watching online, and many will watch after the session. So welcome, everyone. It's great. I hope everybody's having a great end to the semester. The President wanted me to take the first 15 minutes or so and provide a update on the impact of the various legislative activities that have occurred in the state over the last year, with a focus on the impact of academic affairs. We've been working very closely with the faculty, leadership across campus to be in compliance with these new regulations, and she wanted me to take the first few minutes and talk about how we are complying with those, the update, and also what is in store for 2026. And before we begin that, I thought it was important maybe to sort of set my comments regarding the ways we are complying with the state legislative actions in sort of the broader landscape of higher education. I think for anyone who is reading the papers or knowing what's happened in the last 6 to 9 to 12 months, you might feel like me, in the sense that, I've been in higher education now close to 30 years, and this is probably a year of some of the most transformational activities across our nation, in our state, in higher education. And so, what I'll talk about today is mostly the work that we've done to be in compliance with our state regulations, but I think it's important to understand how that work is being done in the context of world events, which impact our international enrollment and our international partnerships, also the activities that are going on at the federal level. Vice President Eric Muth, Vice President Candace Boninger have talked to you about the impact on our research and enrollment, the impact of federal activities, and so we'll focus on the state today, but I think it's important that we recognize that what we discuss today is in the context of some broader transformations that are going on in the landscape of higher education. But what I wanted to focus on today in the 15 minutes is really looking at, that is, if the charts move forward. So let's see here. Is there something I'm missing about the arrow?
Let's try this.
The key to everything. There we go. Thank you, Amy. As I mentioned, I wanted to take some time and talk to the campus about how we are working to enact the various compliance in academic affairs. And there's really two pieces of legislation that are important. You may recall over the past year, our Ohio legislature passed Senate Bill 1, and that turned into the Advance Ohio Higher Education Act when it was enacted into law. What you might have heard less about is the work that went on for House Bill 96, which is a very important piece of legislation which funded higher education across the state, but as I'll point out in a few minutes, had some important provisions which impact our academic affairs on campus. And before we get into some of the details, I think it's important sort of to set the stage at a high level, because I think when you look at these pieces of legislation, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, they really are very transformative. And there's been a number of somewhat painful and difficult decisions that have been made over the last several months to comply with this new legislation. But I think when you look at the academic affairs provisions associated with these two pieces of legislation, they sort of compartmentalize into three areas. The way I see it as Provost and Chief Academic Officer is this legislation is really focusing on increasing the level of accountability that we have as an institution to the taxpayers of the state, and also the families and students that provide tuition to the university. This is accountability in terms of faculty evaluation policies, post-tenure review. And I'll go through those in detail in a few minutes, but those all really, in my mind, point to their desire to have increased accountability in our organization. And then I think if you look across the state, I meet with the provosts across the state about once a month, and I think you see that a lot of the goal of this legislation is to make the policies associated with higher education across the state quite consistent and have minimized the differences in how we deal with critical activities across our campuses in the 14 public institutions of higher education here in the state of Ohio. And I think it's also very important to understand that many of these new provisions in the academic affairs provide increased board oversight. The Board of Trustees of the university has always had significant oversight on our academic affairs, but I'll point out in a few minutes some of the ways that that's being expanded and how we're working with the board to make sure that we can institute those next year. So a bit of a trigger warning. The next few charts are going to be quite dense. And I just wanted to, highlight that there was some intent there because I want to get across really the expanse of what we're accomplishing and also the breadth at which the state is asking us to attend to these various matters associated with academic affairs. They're also intended to give us a point of reference in the spirit of transparency, give you something to look back on to understand all the different aspects that we're dealing in these two pieces of legislation. When you look at the legislation in total, you'll see that there's a number of aspects of our operations associated with faculty affairs, academic affairs, and then a number of other pieces of provisions in the legislation. For faculty affairs, you'll notice that there's aspects around being more prescriptive around faculty workload, faculty evaluation, having more structured performance evaluation processes, and so on. In the academic affairs piece, there's new provisions associated with us having public posting of syllabi. The legislature has required all institutions across the state to create a new American Civic Liberty course, literacy course, which attends to certain aspects of American history and civic literacy that are prescribed within the law. There was, as you might have seen, the new legislation required us to eliminate programs that did not meet a certain threshold of graduates over the last few years. And then there are a number of other provisions around, as I mentioned, the Board of Trustees, training associated with DEI, as well as various other provisions. And so I put this up here to give you a sense of really the expanse of this legislation and all the different ways that it's impacting our academic affairs, which of course impacts our faculty to a large degree across campus, but also our staff, our students as well, anyone who interacts with our over 31,000 students in our various campuses and locations. And so to give you a sense of what we've done over the past several months to meet these needs, I hope that there's a feeling that we've been, one, very transparent about the need to comply with these various provisions, but also we've engaged a number of stakeholders to make sure that their voices are heard, namely the faculty and those that are going to be impacted by these changes in these provisions. As early as June of this past year, we started working on interim policies to make sure that we were in compliance with the law. And then when the faculty returned in August, we put together various work groups where we could get faculty input on various provisions, and they provided guidelines associated with their, the impact on faculty affairs. We had a period where the interim policies, accordance with our policy on policies, were out for comment, and we did look at all those comments and make some changes to the interim policies based on the feedback that we received. And then in October, we worked with our Board of Trustees to finalize the policies. We also, as required by law, had to remove, not by law, but by resolution from our Board of Trustees, had to remove various aspects of our faculty handbook, which conflicted with the new regulations. And then I apologize for a few acronyms, but then we started working on what we call the Standard Operating Procedures, or SOPs, which are the documents that we will use to actually execute these various new policies associated with these provisions. That work is ongoing, and we have a number of these SOPs that are currently out for public comment, and we are looking at the responses. Those responses are due by the end of this week, and we will use those responses to make any necessary changes that can be made before these SOPs go into effect later this month. And then finally, as it says, later this month in December, on December 24th, these new provisions will go into effect, these policies and standard operating procedures. I think it's also important to know that these new legislative activities have required our Board of Trustees to pass a number of resolutions. In short, we are in compliance with all these new regulations, but to give you a sense of how we've had to work with the Board of Trustees to be in compliance, we worked with our legal team and the Board of Trustees to pass policies associated with the American Civics Literacy course, the faculty workload policies, a general policy around compliance and intellectual diversity. There's also new policies associated with annual evaluation of faculty, tenure, post-tenure review, and faculty retrenchment. And before I go on, I do want to make a very important point, which is there's a number of aspects in this set of laws which, quite frankly, we were already doing. The university has always evaluated its faculty. We've always assigned workload. We've had policies around tenure and so forth. And so in many ways, these new provisions weren't significant changes to the way this university has operated for many, many years. The main change was the law required us to put these into policies rather than certain aspects of other governance mechanisms. And so while some of the substance might not have changed drastically, there was requirement by law for the Board of Trustees to pass these resolutions, and I'm pleased to say that we are in compliance with all of these new regulations. And then, as I mentioned, the policies that were passed were focused on ensuring compliance with the new laws. But then what these new laws really did not prescribe to us was how these new policies were going to be operationalized. And so, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we've developed a process called the Standard Operating Procedures. So these will basically be companion documents to these new policies. This presentation actually has links to all of these standard operating procedures. While we weren't required to do so, we did put these standard operating procedures out for public comment, and those public comments, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, are coming in, and we've given the campus community till this Friday to provide comments, and we are getting a number of comments. Our Faculty Senate, for example, had a meeting on Monday where they aggregated a number of their comments from their leadership role and have provided those to us as well. And so these are the documents that will be the companions to the policies that will allow us to operationalize these various policies. On Monday, we talked with the Faculty Senate about the fact that these policies can be amended from time to time, and so we're working through the process of how those amendments might occur in the future. But the goal right now is to make sure that we can get these policies, these standard operating procedures completed by December 24th, so that these various aspects of the provisions can go into law. I do want to make sure that the campus understands that not only have we been transparent about this work, we've also engaged a number of different stakeholder groups to give us feedback on various aspects of these provisions. And so over the course of the last 6 months, we've had a number of faculty and administrative leadership working groups. You can see the list here. I'm not going to go through each one of them. But the theme here is that we recognize that the voice of the stakeholders, especially the voice of the faculty, was critically important in this process. And so even though many of the policies were very prescriptive and we didn't have a lot of wiggle room in what we could put in the policies, we felt it was very important to engage stakeholders across campus, especially faculty, in response to these new policies, as well as these standard operating procedures, which are ongoing. And so our goal was to make sure that we were very transparent and very engaged with campus stakeholders so that when these went into effect, we had heard the voices across campus. And one of the, if we look over the next few months, we will be continuing this work. We still have a number of standard operating procedures that we need to develop. And one work that we'll be doing with our academic leaders, the deans, as well as their department leadership, is having more structured faculty workload policies. Again, this is an example where these policies have been in place for a number of years, but these new regulations are requiring us to modify the way we do these. And essentially this will allow us to have a consistent way of assigning faculty workload across campus and allow us to, in many ways, make sure that we are accountable in terms of the resources that we are being provided. And this is really maybe more for the faculty in the sense that we've really looked at this as a continuum. And so I'm an engineer, so I love block diagrams. And this block diagram that's up here really just sort of sets out the notion of how we're looking at all these various aspects of the provisions and understanding how they work together. The SETs and PETs that you see on here, I apologize for the acronyms, are student evaluations of teaching and peer evaluation of teaching, which are requirements that we now have in these new laws. And the purpose of this picture is really to show that we're not thinking of these issues as separate, we're thinking of them in a combined fashion and making sure that in addition to being in compliance, we're doing it in such a way that it recognizes the interconnections between these various activities. And then finally, in the next stages, these policies, as I mentioned, have been passed by our board, but the standard operating procedures will be complete by this month. We do have some more work groups that will go into the spring. And then we recognize that these are university-level policies, and so we're working with the deans and their department-level leadership to understand how their policies might need to be changed or how they might reflect these new provisions in the new work that we've done. And then going forward, next year, a significant effort is going to be to work with our Board of Trustees to make sure they are in compliance. Their authority has been expanded, as I mentioned earlier, to look at our curriculum, and also they're required to look at our general education. And so we will be working with the board starting in the January meeting to make sure that we complete that work. They have a deadline to complete that work by March of 2027. And then let me just step back in the minute I have remaining and just say, I started this conversation by saying these are transformative changes, and I think everybody across campus recognizes that. And I think, we're at an institution that's been around for over 220 years. And so I think, as we navigate these changes at all levels, I think the important aspect is for us to go back and just make sure we are reflecting on our mission. And I think if we reflect on our mission, we will navigate these significant changes in the best way possible. And so I, of course, put the mission up here. Our president likes to condense it and say it's to enter to learn, depart to serve. And I think if we remember that as we navigate these significant changes, we will come out of these changes over the next several months and years a stronger institution. Finally, I do want to make sure that one of the themes of this is just the expansive nature and the transformative nature of this work. It cannot be done without a team of dedicated individuals, and I just wanted to take a minute to recognize a number of people in the Provost's office, Dr. Katie Hartman, Dr. Sarah Bajoni, Dr. Carrie Frith, and Carrie Saunier, who have worked tirelessly to make sure that we're in compliance, but also to make sure that we are being transparent and make sure that we're hearing all the voices heard. I also want to call out the partnership that we've had with our faculty senate, especially the leadership, Dr. Todd Eisworth. We've appreciated his cooperation and partnership, as well as all of the faculty working groups, the deans and department leadership now that is working on the various aspects. You can see how expansive this is, but I really want to appreciate everybody's work in getting us to this point, making sure we're not only in compliance, but also making sure that we're going to come out of this a stronger institution in the future. And I just want to quickly note that all of this is on our website, and so you can look at the websites that are updated as we make progress in this work. And so thank you very much. Now, my last item is to welcome our next speaker. David Moore is our Vice President for Finance Administration and Chief Academic Officer. I'm the Chief Academic Officer, Chief Finance Officer. You didn't know that, David, did you? He's going to come up next and talk about our budget. So thanks. Welcome him, please.
Thank you, Don. Excellent. And thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm David Moore. I have the privilege of serving as the Vice President for Finance and Administration. For my presentation today, I will focus on the university's FY26 or fiscal year 26 operating budget. Ohio University's use of its resources reflects its values as well as meeting its mission to hold the door open to higher education. So the next question we would have is, what is the university's overall expense budget? So today what I will do is walk through not only the expense budget, but also to walk through the resource budgets, to walk through each category of the expense and resource budget, to give you some examples, and these would be examples, not full list, but examples of what comes under each category within the resources and expense budget. So the overall total university spending budget is $968 million. When you can see this, what you can see from this chart is that we track a number of different categories. And we'll go through each of these categories and the items that come into each of them. So looking at the starting category is total compensation. Total compensation is a combination of salaries and wages along with fringe benefits. When you look at total compensation, this makes up a total of $526 million, or 54% of the overall expense budget. When you look at the components that come into the overall total compensation, you look at salaries and wages, which have subcategories such as faculty salaries, administrative salaries, classified salaries, as well as student wages. And then into our fringe benefits, we also have items such as our healthcare benefits, items such as our retirement and employee educational benefits. When you look at what makes up the overall $526 million, salaries and wages represents approximately 72%, and 28% is made up of the fringe benefits. Moving to our next category is scholarships and fellowships. Under scholarships and fellowships, this is about 16% of our overall expense budget, or $151 million. When you look at the overall expense budget for scholarships and fellowships, you see two categories here, undergraduate and graduate. You also see that what's common between them is that there are institutional aid that makes up some of the overall scholarships and fellowships, but also two federal and state financial aid grants. Our next category is supplies and services. This makes up approximately 10% of the overall expense budget and represents $92 million. Supplies and services is a very large category, very broad. So I will mention a few areas, but there are many more items that are not mentioned, so this is not a full list. So when we think about some of the categories that come up under supplies and services, think about items such as advertising and marketing costs, information technology, which includes hardware, software, and accessories, also includes communication data costs. Travel and entertainment is a large portion of our overall, or one portion of the overall supplies and services. And rounding out would be general supplies for our classrooms, our laboratories, and our offices. Debt service, unlike the previous category, debt service is fairly straightforward. You have two categories, payments for interest and payments for principal. Debt service is when the university, debt services supports the debt that the university has entered into. When you have debt service, it's usually paid over a number of years, and usually the debt that we have taken out as the university supports facilities such as housing and our dining facilities, as well as other facilities that we have used debt as a vehicle to help complete the project, and then we pay for the debt service through our operating budget over a period of time. We turn to our next category again, another item or another area that has a very broad category, operation and maintenance. When you think about operation and maintenance, I want you to think about all the buildings that we have here on the Athens campus, but also across our regional campuses as well. Operation and maintenance supports those, or expenses support those facilities. So think about fuel, think about upkeep, think about electricity, think about safety. Also think about equipment and also vehicles as well, and repairs for our overall facilities. This represents $49 million or 5% of the overall expense budget. Professional service is our next category. Professional service is services that we receive that's external to the university. So when you think about external services, or when you think about professional services, think about our auditing fees. You can also think about when a unit contracts with a professional consulting firm to provide some services to the university. Also, you can think about the performing arts and artists' fee when they come through as we have those performances here at the campus. Other operating expenses, really kind of a collection of different costs. When you think about the costs here, $32 million or 3% of the overall expense budget. What makes up this cost is capital costs, approximately 22%. Cost of goods sold is approximately 58%, and 20% is for other or general operating expenses. So what's included in one of the largest areas, we'll select cost of goods sold, for example. When you look at cost of goods sold, think about our catering or our culinary services. They purchase food, and then they have two outcomes from that purchase of the food: to supply meals to our residential students through our meal plans, and then also to provide catering services to departments or other entities across the campus, or even sometimes outside. When you think about the overall catering, food services catering, that's a good example of cost of goods sold. You're buying the food, and therefore you're reselling, so that's cost of goods sold. Again, that represents 58% of the overall total. When you think about costs within capital, these are typically capital related costs that are not capitalized, that are expensed within the year. Rounding out our overall expenses is our transfers to plant and non-operating. Transfers to plant is for approved projects that have where we are transferring operating dollars over for approved capital projects. We are capturing the capital expense in a capital account. When we think about our overall transfers to quasi-endowment, the second type, that is where the university may receive some resources that we are wanting to put in a longer-term investment vehicle that will then allow us to generate additional resources. So an example, a university department receives gift funding, and the university department decides to put it in a quasi-endowment so that it can generate additional resources that then can be utilized for the purpose that the department selects. So maybe they're putting dollars away in a quasi-endowment so they can generate long-term interest earnings, and those interest earnings could be used for scholarships for our students, as an example. This completes the overall expense budget for the university. So the next natural question is, where do the resources come from, and how do they support the $968 million expense budget? So, turning to our overall resources, the university's total resources is $968 million. When we look at the overall resources, we see the categories here that are displayed that we track. And then within each of those categories, and we'll walk through each of those, they have subcategories that I'll give examples for. Our first category is tuition and fees. When you think about our overall tuition and fees, that represents 45% of our overall resources. Tuition and fees comes in the form of undergraduate tuition, which is about 68% of that piece of the pie. Graduate tuition, which represents 14%, 12% for graduate education, and 6% in the forms of student fees. Student fees could be program or course fees. Our second resource, or largest resource, is our state appropriation. State appropriation comes in two forms. First form is our line item appropriations. Line item appropriations comes in the form of direct resources to the university from the state. The line item appropriation accounts for approximately $8 million of the $177 million, or 18% of the total resources. The second item is our state share of instruction, or SSI. Our state share of instruction, or SSI, has a number of different components and is a outcomes-based funding model that the state has followed for a number of years to fund institutions of higher education. Our support in the SSI comes from a number of different areas. First, course completion, followed by degree completion, doctoral and medical education, as well as a new component, which is employment outcomes-based. Overall, this is how, when you bring all those components together, this is how we receive our SSI funding from the state each year. Our next category is room and board. We've talked about expenses such as meal plans, but you have the resources that are coming in. So we have room and board, room being the housing plans and board being our meal plans. Overall, $120 million in total for this resource, or for this piece of the pie, 12% of our overall resource budget. Meal plans represents approximately $48 million, and housing plans represent approximately $78 million of the overall total. Moving into our contracts and grants and F&A, this is resources that we receive for sponsored research activity that come in for federal, state, and non-governmental contracts and grants. When we think about some of the subcategories that we see here, overall contracts and grants and facilities and administrative, which is what F&A stands for, accounts for approximately 58% of our overall budget, or 5%, or overall 58 million of the overall budget. When you look at the subcategories, you see that we have 68% that comes from federal and state resources. We also have 18% or a percentage coming from our F&A rates, and then also to our local and private foundations. There you go. A grouping of resources is our endowment, gifts and contribution, and investment income. When you look at our overall piece of the pie here, it's 57 million, or of the overall resources that we receive. Endowment distribution represents the largest share, which is about 37 million within endowment distribution. Endowment distribution represents the interest earnings from our endowment that then is the annual amount that we then use for operations. And they are used for specific purposes. Gifts and contributions come in from donors throughout the year, and we use those as specified. And then investment income rounds out about 9 million, and that helps our overall operating budget. Moving into internal sales, external sales, and other sources. This source represents 72 million of our overall resources, or a total of 8%. When we think about internal sales, we'll talk about each of these. Internal sales is within departments within the university. So again, I'm going to go back to catering. when catering is asked to provide a service, when they provide that service and are paid for from another department, that is internal sales. For external sales, it's completely external to the universities. So this is when we provide services or products external to the university, and those things or items could be, or examples could be, food and beverages sales, ticketed events across the university, such as athletics, and also to our performing arts. And then other sources, again, comes from external to the university. And external to the university, some of the examples would be our NCAA revenue that comes in through our athletics department, or also to other revenues that come in from purchasing rebates and other activity. Rounding out our sources is our strategic use of reserves. First is the use of reserves to support transfers to plant, which is for capital or approved capital projects, and for non-operating or quasi-endowment type activity. The second part is our strategic use of reserves for operating activity. And overall, that's approximately $49 million, or 5% of the overall budget. The operating activity, as we've talked about, you've seen through a letter that I sent about the budget, but also too that we've been talking about in the next fiscal years, future fiscal years, we'll be working to reduce our reliance on the use of our limited reserves. Those reserves will continue to help us through this year and through future years, but we will be starting to limit those overall reserves. With that, I would like to say thank you to everyone for giving me the opportunity to present. Our next presenter is Greg Simmons, our Vice President for University Advancement.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Give David another round of applause. Great job, right? Great, super. Thank you. So I was joking with the President Amy. I've made it a whole year before having to come here. But you got me, tracked me down, and I am delighted to be here today. What we're going to do for the next 15 minutes or so is just just take a step back and remind everybody what University Advancement does, give a little bit of detail so you have a sense of what we're measuring and how we're tracking, and then we'll talk about where we need to be going as a division and with the campus in the years ahead. And so thanks for having me. I will kind of remind you broadly that we're the organization that's responsible for generating a part of the piece of the pie with you, right? So everything that comes with philanthropy and maintaining that philanthropy, it's invested in the university as part of the University of Advancement. So we have all of our fundraising activities, our alumni engagement activities, and we also manage the endowment and the foundation. The endowment that David mentions has about $800 million invested. There's about another $400 million invested on top of that, which includes things like the Century Bond, which helps with facilities renewals, and then other quasi-endowment investments that we hold on behalf of the university to support programs and people and initiatives over the course of the academic year. So when we think about it, we've been talking a lot as a division about how we frame that work and how we position the work and how we set it up and how we make decisions about where we spend our time. And for us, it kind of really comes down to 5 key areas that we're focused on every year. So we're thinking about how do we raise more and more money every year, right, to support the work that you all do, the support that our faculty do, to support the needs that students have, right? And so if you think about that upward trend, that means we have to find more people to give. We have to use that money wisely. We have to report back out on it, and we have to inspire them to give again and again. To do that, we know that we increasingly have to be using data in a way that's more effective than we have. That means a couple different things. We've got to really do a good job at maintaining the data that we have. How do we know where our graduates are? How do we know where our donors are? How do we know where their dollars are being spent when they invested in us? How do we work with our campus partners to understand the experiences that people have had as students so we can inform that and we can use that in our relationship building with our potential philanthropic partners going forward. And then increasingly, and we've got a lot of work to do here, is how do we think about all that data and use it in a way that analytically allows us to make better decisions with what we do with scarce resources? How do we anticipate and develop programs that are going to be exciting and interesting to people? How do we figure out where to spend time and where to send people, and how to think about what individuals might be more likely to invest in the campus community, and how do we use their stories to think better about how to inspire others? So thinking about data is something that we've talked a lot about. We've got a lot of work to do there, but it's something that we're taking very seriously, and you are a really important part of that work. Thinking about donor or alumni engagement, right? How do we think about the kinds of things that our graduates do? And we'll talk a little bit later about how we think about that and what great partners many of you in this room are in that work. We also think that we need to be a best-in-class partner in helping celebrate the work that donors help us do, right? So that means, how do we thank people when they give a gift? How do we help them understand the impact that it makes on this campus? How do we tell stories that people understand that philanthropy is really central to our success as an institution? And so we think that we can do a better job as a community at doing that work and inspiring people to give again and again. And frankly, how do we, we talk a little bit about this. We just were at John McCarthy's great event where they acknowledge some of their community partners, and they use this word gratitude. How do we help people understand that the core of what we do, gratitude matters, right? People give of their time and attention. They don't have to. Nobody owes us their philanthropy or their time. When they do, we need to thank them, and we need to show them how much we appreciate it. And finally, as a leadership team in the division, we also like the dynamic strategies. We're thinking a lot about, how do we build a team? What do we do in our division that makes us the kind of organization that people want to come to, that helps us attract and keep the best talent to make sure that we're keeping things moving forward? So that's the work that we're kind of doing at a high level. We'll talk about this in terms of kind of what that means in fundraising, what it means in alumni engagement, and where that's going to have us going looking forward. So if you think about raising money, how did we do last year? So last year we raised almost $47 million, right? And we brought, right? Yeah, we can clap for that, huh? Let's do some clapping around here. That included about $49 million in cash, right? So the $46.5 million represents new cash and new pledges. Sometimes we realize additional money, right? Maybe somebody had a planned gift, and that when that comes in, a little bit more money than we expected came, or people had more, they added more to their pledge because the stock market was good to them, or they were really inspired by something. So if you get more dollars than you expect, that's a pretty good problem to have, right? So we'll take it. If you think about how many donors, that was just over 16,000 donors. About 9,800 of them are our own graduates, okay? That's pretty good. We'll talk about that again a little bit later. This year, we talked about raising more money every year. Our goal this year is about $47.5 million. We talked a little bit about analytics and data. What we're trying to do is do a better job at predicting where we should be and what those goals will look like, and then how do we elevate them every year. So when we think about where this money should come from, we think about $24 million will come from major gifts, people, individuals and families who make large gifts or pledges over time. Look at about $4.5 million that Katie All Good and her team will do through things like Socktober and Giving Tuesday and Giving Day, the things that all of you are so central in helping be successful. We're expecting about $7 million in corporate and foundation relations money. We're doing a lot of work at trying to increase that part of the bucket, particularly working with Eric Muth and his team. And then about $12 million we're projecting will be in new planned gift and bequests commitments. So we're, as of, we'll see in a few minutes where we're doing, we'll build some drama, let you know where we are today, right? So if you step back and see, how does that $46.5 million compare to what we've been? This is what we've looked like for the last couple years. I would say the banner year most recently was FY24, right? Does anybody know what happened in FY24, that $59 million? Chadwick Moore, right? Give ourselves a round of applause for that. That's a big deal. When you get somebody to invest that much money, it's a big deal. For the most part, what you see is we've done a really good job raising between $40 and $45 million for the last 5 or 6 years. What we know is that we have ambitious goals, we've got big plans, and we have expenses that are rising, things that we can't control. So what we're talking about is how do we elevate that platform? How do we go from a place where we're raising, $40 to $45 million to $55 to $65 million every year, right? So those are the things that when we talked about those first 5 goals, that's what we're trying to get to. How do we increase the amount of regular and consistent and dependable investment into the work that you do every year? If you think kind of year over year and where we are right now, right, this was the drama. It says 13.9 as of today. $16.2 million, right? So we're just over a third of the year in. We're about a third of the way, feeling pretty good. And the numbers that we have, we track things like how many proposals are out in the field, how many do we expect in the next 6 months, and those are things that kind of give us a pretty good sense of where we are, and we're sitting in a pretty good position right now. This gives you a sense of where we are with the number of donors. We're trending a little bit ahead on total donors and alumni donors year to date, and that's October. Socktober crushed it. Who got socks? Right, there's a lot of socks in here. The Socktober exceeded expectations. We're really proud of that, so we'll keep you posted on that. Again, if you look at this bottom line, I'm supposed to stay at the microphone, sorry. All you online watching, thanks very much. We're glad you could join us today. You'll see we've been at about, between 15 and 16,000 donors and between 87 and 9,500 alumni donors for the past 4 or 5 years. Again, to get to those numbers we're talking about, we got to get to the place where we're at 12 to 15,000 alumni donors and 20 to 25,000 total donors every year. So that's the kind of ambition we have for our campus community and for our philanthropic partners. So raising money is a part of it, but that's not the only part of it. What we know is that people have to be invested in a place. Our alums and our retired faculty and staff are people who know us the best. They built this place. Their legacy is the work that we do and that they do when they leave this place. So thinking about what we do with alums and how we engage them is the other really important part of what we do. And these two things really work hand in hand. So we think about how we connect our Bobcats to one another and their university forever, right? That's kind of nice language. So this happens at 4 different levels, right? We think about communication. What's the stuff that we send out to our graduates so they know what's going on? How do we think about experiences when they come to a game or a theater event, it show up at a networking activity? How do they volunteer to give their time back? Are they serving on boards? Are they participating as mentors? And then ultimately, are they making investments with their dollars in this place? The real kind of compelling work starts to happen when you see individuals and families working across different levels, right? So if somebody's reading a newsletter every day and then participating as a mentor, or coming to events regularly and then investing in a sports team or a musical act because they really understand it and love it, that's really what our engagement activities are about, is showing a place where people can be active and connected, and then that inspiring them to see what more they can do with their time and their dollars. And our team is doing a fantastic job in that regard. Obviously, this happens in, yeah, graphics. See, I do have graphics. Very dramatic. So that obviously happens in events and programs, right? So, I was going to talk about how we had an alumni event at the Cleveland Browns game when my Baltimore Ravens beat the Browns, but then Thanksgiving night happened. And so we're going to not talk about the Ravens or Cleveland sports teams at all, or Cincinnati sports teams at all. But we do a broad range of events that are really driven by the interests of our graduates and what we see them asking for and demanding and being interested in. I'm particularly proud of the work Jen and her team are doing actually tomorrow. Don talked a little bit about the impact of some legislation that has changed and constrained a little bit the ways that we can engage our alums. Tomorrow, we're actually piloting in Columbus with about 25 graduates a conversation about belonging as alumni. And what are the things that alums really care about? What do they like to see in events? What can we do to make sure that we're providing a context that all of our graduates feel comfortable and engaged and want to come back? And we're really going to ask our alums to help us build that. We're not going to be constrained by what public policy may tell us we can or can't do. We have to be driven by what our graduates want, and so we're going to let that come directly from our students. There'll be more to come as we kind of go through tomorrow's experiment, and we plan to roll that out in at least 3 more cities between now and the end of the year. We're also making sure that the work that we do in alumni engagement is deeply aligned with the dynamic strategies, right? So we're doing a tremendous amount with coaching and mentorship. The Bobcat Network is a platform that allows alums to connect with faculty and students in a lot of different ways. And we're particularly excited about the program that we're doing with career services for third and fourth year students that think about how do we make sure as people are coming up towards graduation, they connect with people who have had similar experiences in a relatively short period of time. How do we give them a little bit of wind at their back to make sure that they leave here and they can prepare for their transition to the real world, whatever that is, right? This kind of feels like the real world to me too, but whatever that transition looks like will help give them a little bit more access to experience and stories to help them be more successful. So it's about communication, experiences, volunteers, and investment. Now, we've talked a lot about kind of how we get to the next level, how we get to, somebody threw a clicker at me. And we have talked a lot, people have kind of murmured about this idea of campaign, right? The last campaign was the Promise Lives campaign, which ended in 2015, a fantastically successful campaign. A lot has happened since 2015, right? And we have not, as a campus, had a comprehensive campaign since then. So we're really working actively on preparing for that. Campaigns happen in kind of three different stages, right? How do you plan? How do you think about, what's it going to look like? What are you going to count? How are you going to count it and when? What we call a kind of a silent or a planning phase where you're really trying to solidify what your priorities are. You're trying to think about volunteer leadership. You're planning programming. You're raising real significant leadership gifts, ideally securing about what you would expect to be a 2/3 to 3/4 of your total goal. And then a public launch, right, where you really celebrate with a lot of fanfare and energy and use those first kind of 2/3 and 3/4 to get you over the top in a way that the entire campus community can celebrate. So we're working really hard. I would say we're kind of halfway through the planning phase. You'll start to see, actually in January, we're in Florida with a whole bunch of alums in a number of contexts. We were with our foundation board last week, and we're framing a little bit more of a developed schedule for this. You'll start to see a lot more language as early as this spring about how we raise money to support students, student scholarships, the student experiences, and the things that faculty do to make sure our students are successful. So stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting ride, and one that's going to really, I think, allow people to be engaged in the work in a completely different way. I told my team and others that I wouldn't say this again. This will be the last time I say it. Last month, I celebrated my 1-year anniversary at Ohio University, right? Right. So I realize that some of my colleagues in particular hear this again and again, so they're very patient with me. But if I look back, I'm really proud of the work that we've done as a division, and many of you have been involved in that. So we've really we've worked on kind of the divisional leadership team, what we want to do, what we think is important, and we've worked with the rest of the team and kind of pulling that through a little bit. We've talked about data and data utilization. We know we have a lot of work to do, but we've really been making progress at thinking about how do we stage it, what's important, who are the partners in the organization and outside the organization that we know we need to work with. How do we work with the provost and the deans, all of whom have been excellent partners in fundraising historically, but we know they want to be more involved. We need to give them more access, more information, more tools, and more training. So we've been working a lot on that, and we're going to be starting with a series of trainings with the deans starting in January that'll be ongoing to help them see themselves and have the tools they need to be better equipped to support us in this work. As I mentioned, we've been working really closely with Eric to think about how do we kind of change the way that we do corporate partnership and work with national foundations to increase that kind of investment in the place, and then really working to make sure that people understand that we can't do this work alone. Everybody in this room is involved in the work that we do one way or the other, whether that's our CFAOs who are processing distributions, whether that's faculty who are taking students on trips, whether it's staff who are moderating student clubs or coaches who are putting students in a position to be successful. Everybody's involved in this work. We need to do a better job at helping you understand and thanking you for the places that you show up in it, giving you places that you can be more active in it if you're interested, and helping you understand the impact so you can tell that story. It's not like kind of flipping on a switch, right? It's kind of the work that you do. Nothing happens overnight, but these are the things we're really consistently and concretely, actively working on, and we want you to hold us accountable to that. When we met with the foundation last week, we talked a little bit about this idea of campaign. We talked about this idea of kind of consistent progress to get to the next level. And I just kind of shared this quote with them, this idea from Aristotle that excellence is never an accident. It's always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives. Choice, not chance, determines your destiny. The things that we do make a difference. We have to pay attention to the smallest details. The smallest gift is important to us as $1 million gift. We have to help people understand that them coming to an event and leaving with a pin and proudly demonstrating that they're part of the Bobcat community is important. And the things that you do to support me and my colleagues every day makes a big difference. So thanks for what you do. Have a great rest of your afternoon. And I think I'm turning it over to the president.
Let's have one more round of applause for all our presenters. So our next update will be in February, so notice the employee news to find out the date. The place will be here, we hope. It is, Amy says, it is here. So after this, in the ballroom, we have this event to say thank you, and we hope all of you will come, and I promise you there will be oxygen. So please join us as we all say thank you for what you do for our university every day. It is a joy to be here, and it's all because of you. So thank you.